and we are super glad to be back and have you here in our studio talking about the upcoming election.
Yeah, primary is coming up.
Primary is coming up. We've got
Legislative update.
Do you know who we have in audience today, Mark?
Well, I'm looking at him, so yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who it is.
You do?
Yeah, unless you're talking about...
Why don't you do the big introduction, Mark?
Well, with us today, we have our senator from the 5th District, Mr. Steve Meredith. And Steve, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, but are you sure it's me? I was stepping out of the vehicle at Tractor Supply last night, and some guy came up to me and said, I thought you were Steve Martin, but no, I'm Steve Meredith.
Did you have a banjo in your hand?
No, I didn't.
Because he plays the banjo really well.
Yeah, banjo in his hand, arrow through the skull, through the arrow hat.
Yep.
You know what else? There was a guy on Jeopardy a couple years ago. He's been on like the Tournament of Champions and stuff too. I swear he looks straight up like Steve. I mean, you do have some favor there, but this guy was like, it could be his brother. I mean, it was twin brother. It was and I know Kathy, who's in the audience with us today, is she can attest to that. He is just like, when you first look at him, you're like, Steve Martin's on Jeopardy. No, it's not Steve Martin, but
the other guy I get is Steve Pence.
Steve.
I was walking down the Capitol Annex.
It's the hair, probably, right?
Probably, I guess. But I was walking down the Capitol Annex one evening, and there's a group of kids that were like 50 yards away, and they came running up to me, and they said, "Are you president of the United States?" I said, No, I'm not.
Oh,
so
nutty!
I walked with them back to their mother, and I was laughing. I said, "Your kids thought I was president of the United States." She said, "Well, you are somebody famous, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm just a state senator." And she said, "No, I've seen you somewhere before." I said, "Well, I've been on KET. Maybe that's where you saw." She said, "No. You're Vice President of the United States, aren't you?" I said, "No."
Oh, my Lord.
I am not.
Oh, my goodness. So tonight...
I'm sure you've been called worse.
Most certainly, yes.
I just want to make sure I do a shout out. You can dial in tonight at 270-945-3418. That's 270-945-3418 and ask your questions. Or you can tune in live on from the Messenger Studios and from the Meade Truth, wherever you're watching, and you can actually chat in your questions, and we'll try to get them into Senator Meredith tonight. But tonight, we definitely wanted to go into the conversation about the legislation that you just came out of. Feels like there was a lot of things going on.
A lot of things going on. And this is my 8th legislative session, and everyone's the same. During the session, I think this is the worst session ever. And then we go home, and I get a couple of weeks to kind of reflect on it. And like I did this time, I thought, this was a great session. Turned out to be a great session. But I think what made it particularly brutal this time is my first session, I think we had something like 800 bills that were filed that we had to work with. And I thought then that's too many bills to deal with during a 60-day session or 30-day session.
Right.
This time we had 1,220 bills that were filed.
Yeah, we've been talking about that. Just the fact that the sheer numbers of trying to get through those bills is just it's an enormous task.
Well, we've got to change that process, and I've talked to a lot of colleagues about that. Is kind of having a gentleman's agreement that no senator will file more than 5 bills, and give priority to each of those bills, and trying to get some structure to it. We need to make it a more effective legislative session. But it was a good session. It was a budget session, and I was quite concerned about that because this is my 4th budget session. And I thought it would be the most challenging that we've ever seen because of so many organizations relying on COVID funding that now that's disappeared from the federal government, and they're turning to us and asking for that. And our budget, including the Medicaid funding, it's about $30 billion. And I heard, and I haven't been able to substantiate it, but the fiscal ask for this budget, we're approaching $100 billion.
Yeah.
And obviously, we couldn't do that.
Yeah. Without naming names or anything, what was the number? What was the most bills filed by any one person? 50 bills.
I think that's too many.
I mean, no doubt about that.
That's too many.
I'm glad to send people to the Senate to do work, but I mean, there's what is there, like
That clogs the
How many
system.
senators are there? There's
38.
38.
Yes.
So yeah, so if you figure
Yeah.
if everybody did 50, I mean, you're looking at was it that's going to be like 1,900 bills.
Well, you do that in both chambers, 138 legislators, and it's astronomical numbers, but it's unrealistic. Maybe it's just to get some attention or something, but that creates a lot of work for the Legislative Research Commission staff.
Because you got to take them serious.
It cuts out time for you. I think you had said, you are chair a committee, and even that committee, you try to dedicate 15 minutes for somebody to pitch a bill. It's like you got 15 minutes. Obviously, you review it in committee and stuff before, but 15 minutes on the floor to throw your bill out and get it voted on, and that's not a lot of time to talk about the ins and outs of a bill. And you're praying that everybody in the room did a read ahead on it, so that they could be bold, be brief, and be brilliant. But is 15 minutes long enough to talk before you make a law?
No, it's not. And one of the things we have to do a better job of is using our interim session to look at legislation. And my good friend and housemate, actually, Senator John Schickel, we coined a phrase called "schickelizing a bill." And Senator Schickel will not hear a bill during session unless he's heard it during the interim, which certainly makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these bills, for the first time that any legislator has heard anything about them, and we need to do a better job. Again, 15 minutes is not adequate time unless you've heard a bill before. My last two meetings of our Health Services Committee meeting, we passed over 16 bills to our time frame. And good legislation, but really sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. And
Yeah.
I remember a quote from Senator David Gibbons when we were struggling with passing a bill one year. He said, we've gone 200 years without this. Can't we wait just one more year? So I'd like to slow the process down and really try to give some priority to legislation that will move our state forward.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we can just get we all agree that there's certain things that need to be done, but everybody has a priority. I think we said this before that we went through this session we went through these sessions as the Republicans became the majority, and it was like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. We all agree on these things, and now you're getting into these sessions where it's like, okay, we've done the stuff that we've pretty much agreed on. Now there's a lot of stuff that we don't agree on that needs to be done, and we need to hash that out. We need to do that in a proper way, but in a timely way. And I think that what you're sharing with us right now is some wisdom there, right? Where it's you have time. You need to make sure that you have time, that you've taken every opportunity to hear a bill and talk through a bill before it even gets into session, so that you can move through quickly and be able to do those things.
Well, my first session, I was lamenting to my seatmate at that time, Senator Judy Rocker Adams, and we were passing a bill that I thought, it's such a waste of time and effort to do this. And she listened to me very politely, and she nodded her head. She said, "But Steve, every bill that's filed is important to someone." And I agree with that.
That's true.
But when you've got a limited amount of time, the bandwidth is so narrow to get any legislation passed that we need to give priority to what's most important to our state. And I think the best two legislative sessions we had is when we established a top 10 priority list. That's 2017, where we really passed some great legislation. And again, the next year when we did the tax code for the first time. And that kept us focused. And once we get through that, then we can look at all the stuff kind of on the peripheral.
The minutia stuff, right? The stuff that's out there.
But what I really would like to see is a strategy to address poverty in Kentucky. Still a major issue for us, and we do a lot of things, but it's like throwing jello up against a wall. Unless we have a plan that can really look at this and have measurable outcomes, we're going to continue to struggle with this.
So you mentioned something funny because you say poverty. There was $30 million for child care in the state, and they only spent like $8 or $9 million of $30 million for child care in the state of Kentucky. That was dedicated in the budget for the previous 2 years. And I know this was a line item discussion, so now you're only going to get $8 million for that, and where does the $30 million go? But my point is there are people that are in charge of these monies, and they could have done a huge amount of damage on improving the poverty for the folks that can't afford early child care development that money could have went into. I mean, I don't know about you, but $22 million, I could buy a lot of things with $22 million, and you could almost built more facilities with $22 million, or startups to do, pre-K daycare and stuff like that, so they can get out and work. and take care of the poverty. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think the struggle is, and as a matter of fact, that the original ask from the child care industry was over $300 million.
Yeah.
A big ask. But I think there's great concern about unintended consequences. We don't want to do anything that's going to potentially destroy that industry.
Sure.
And I think we'll see when we come back next January that we'll have a better strategy ahead of us. But we need to hear from everyone because it affects so many different people. But that certainly is a big piece of the puzzle.
No, I agree, and I thought it was a little bit laughable because the lieutenant governor was walking around talking about how they needed to work on child care and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't they use the money? Anyway, but go ahead. Sorry, but poverty is a big problem, and I think we could do a lot to help our citizens of Kentucky.
Well, it's one of the things that really has a return on investment for us. And I go back to 2017, my first session. And one of our struggles was that our tax code, which you guys are well aware of, at the time, 50% of the income in Kentucky had been exempted from taxation. 50%. Then we had 40% of our working age adults that were not in the workforce, so they're not contributing to tax base, but many of them get entitlement payments. So we got a very small percentage of our population that were carrying the full tax load for Kentucky. And who was that? Working families in Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's why it was so important in 2018 to start our journey towards a broad-based consumption tax in eliminating personal income tax.
Right.
And you can only pull so much from one sector of the workforce or of the community before it starts collapsing. And so so I think it's great that we're moving towards more consumption based. And I think we've talked about that before.
You look at the benefits of it already. It's created jobs in Kentucky. And, this explosion we've seen and an increase in jobs in Kentucky over the last 8 years goes back directly to 2017 when we passed right to work, when we passed prevailing wage, we reduced the corporate income tax in 2018, and that's growing and growing and growing. To solve our problem is not to raise taxes, but to raise tax revenue. And the way we do that is by growing jobs in Kentucky so more people contribute to it,
That's
reducing
right.
the percentage of our population that's not in the workforce, and growing our population.
Yeah, the best way to make more money is to have more production, where people are actually out doing more and working in and contributing and participating, because that way the burden is shared amongst all of us. And I think the easiest way to distribute that tax burden is through consumption. As we buy stuff, let's put the money, that puts us money where we find important. If we buy stuff that we find is important to us.
Well, the naysayers, when we did this, said you're going to rob the state of billions of dollars in revenue, and how are we going to make that up? We haven't seen a quarter yet where we've seen a reduction in tax revenue.
No.
And the reason why, for the average Kentucky family, over the last 8 years, we cut personal income tax 3 times. For the average working family in Kentucky, that's put almost $1,100 in their pockets each and every year. When we get this thing fully implemented, it's going to be over $3,400 the families can rely on.
Right.
Yeah, when it goes to zero, when it finally gets to zero, it's a huge. I mean, it was 6%, I think,
Yes.
when you started, and now it's down to 4.5. It's going to 4.
4%,
It's
go
a
to
4
4,
now, right?
yes.
Yeah, right. That's right. We just did taxes, but that was on 23. So 4.5 last year, 4 this year. And it's probably not going to go down next year, right? We didn't hit the
No, we
threshold.
did not. But again, it's in the budget, and I think we'll be successful the year after that. So
just a quick number, though.
That's why you did it that way.
Yeah, but
Exactly, yes.
quick number. That's
as we can.
$15,300,000,000 across, because the population is about 4.5 million across Kentucky. If that amount of money is going back into the pockets of Kentuckians, then that means that's $15 billion injected back into the economy through economic. I buy something or something like that, or groceries or whatever, and those taxes come back. So if I took that times, even if you raise the tax to 6.2%, hold on a second.
Talking about the sales tax?
Yeah.
well,
Sales tax is 6%. I mean, the goal is
I
to
know.
keep it at 6,
I
right?
got you, but
exactly it is. We will not be raising sales tax.
I think it should go up on things like a big screen TV. I think you should pay like 8% for that. Or if you go to the grocery store, you should pay sales tax, 6% sales tax on things that are not needed. Like you need bread, you don't pay tax
You're
on
talking
bread.
about like
But
a luxury tax.
luxury
or something,
tax.
yeah.
But anyway, because even in the other states that have taxation for hold on, where they don't have income tax. They have those types of taxes because I don't want you to be getting a welfare check, right? And then you can go and buy a big screen TV and drive a Cadillac because we don't, if you want that, you're going to spend your entire welfare check. You need to be spending a welfare check on the things that you can afford, which is, grocery, education, and get out and move out so you can be, productive. That's my opinion.
And I think that's what a working family does. And if you look at how we have broadened the sales tax base, we have focused on things that you pay for from discretionary income. Most notable to me is tattoos are now taxable.
Right.
You're going to pay tax on a shirt that you buy, but you weren't paying tax on tattoo. And folks say, well, then you really haven't reduced the tax burden. You have. You would have to spend $18,000 on tattoos before the tax on that would exceed the personal income tax reduction that we've given you. So this is a model that works.
6.2% puts $1.4 billion back into the taxes, back into the state of Kentucky. $1.4 billion is about $1 million more than the current budget that y'all just approved.
Yes, that's true.
Just saying. Prosecution rests.
It's a good idea, is what Steve is. What Mr. Lake is saying.
Well, it's been tested now. We know that it is. And when Kansas tried this back in 2000, I think it was 16, maybe 17, it was a disaster for them because they tried to do it wholesale, and they couldn't make up the revenue quick enough, so it collapsed. But I think us doing it in a stepwise fashion is about as conservative, as responsible as any government can be. And I truly believe this budget we just passed is probably the most fiscally sound conservative budget in the United States.
So why don't we? I mean, I don't know how much you want to dive into it, but why don't you talk a little bit about what the bills are that you that you're most proud of? Maybe is that the right way to put it, or the ones that you want to talk about today? As far as, you talked about how do we combat poverty in Kentucky, but. So what out of this session? Which ones do you want to highlight?
Well, let me go back one session, if I could, and it's part of the bill that I'm most proud of. Is I was co-chair of a task force to review the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which is the largest cabinet in state government. Over 5,000 employees. They handle about $50 billion in funding that goes through it, and just a massive bureaucracy. And one of the issues we identified is child support payments. That we are $1.4 billion in arrears in child support payment. It's been that way for several years.
Now that's people owing child care or child support payments to
a spouse
who has
custody of the children.
Okay.
Yes. And it's been massive. And part of the problem is it's housed within the cabinet, and they haven't been effective, obviously. So we moved that. It was, I think, Senate Bill 42 or 48 during the previous session. And we moved that function to the Attorney General's office to give it some teeth.
Gotcha.
And that's going to help folks.
And was that in the governor's office before, or where was that at?
It was in the Cabinet for Health and Family Services.
So it was in the cabinet itself. Gotcha.
So now it goes over to the Attorney General's office, and I think that's going to make
basically a bigger stick to collect with, right?
Exactly, to get people's attention.
I think that if I got a letter from the Attorney General, I take a little bit more heed in that one than I do from the Department of Health and Safety Services.
I would think so.
Yeah, it means a little bit more to me when I see that header.
It helps to have a hammer. And,
it does.
And
that's what they're there for. That should be part of the. That's what we should use it's how we should be working within the government to make sure that the government's working together to make sure these things happen, because those are very important pieces of the puzzle for everyday working, or single mother, families, or single parent families, because it could go either way. There's deadbeat moms, there's deadbeat dads, right?
Yes.
So it's I know that's one of the things that. So that's one thing
one of my biggest frustrations in Frankfort is, to me, coming from a business background. I was a hospital CEO for 30 years, and when you see a problem in that environment, you better fix a problem.
Yeah.
And we don't have that accountability within the state government, and it frustrates me
to word these days is accountability.
And it needs to be there. I think every dollar we spend should have some measurable return on investment, and we're not there yet. And one of the things I'd like to see, and I've talked about amongst my colleagues, is some type of zero-based budgeting, because we start programs and they're in state government for years and years and years and years and years. Nobody ever looks at them. Don't know if they're effective or not, but we just continue to fund them because they're there.
Keep doing it. Yeah.
I'm also co-chair of Government Contract Review Committee, and we review every contract that comes through the state. And we had one 2 years ago that we were spending $1 million a year with a group based out of the University of Kentucky that was supposed to provide resources to our public and school systems to improve our reading scores. $1 million a year. It's kind of a think type of group, and they're supposed to look at best demonstrated practices and roll those out to our public school systems. Well, if you followed our reading scores in Kentucky, they have fallen since 2013. So when this contract came up for renewal, I asked the obvious question: why do we want to do that?
It doesn't sound effective if it's
$20 million we have spent and not improved the scores. So I made a motion to terminate that contract. And we did. On government contract review, we really don't have the authority to terminate a contract or disapprove a contract. It can be a recommendation, but then it goes to the finance cabinet and they get the final say on it. And I anticipated that they would say, no, we're going to continue doing this, but then they said, no, we need to terminate this contract.
That's a problem in government in general. Is there's a lot of people out there who come in and they talk a good game. All right, and it seems like, hey, if we do this, we're gonna, it's gonna be this, this, and this, and and if you're asleep at the wheel, it can go on and on and on.
It does go on and on.
And it's good to know that that you guys are seeing that and can pull that back. I'm sure there's a lot more. I mean, our U.S. Senator Rand Paul. I mean, he's listed that kind of stuff at the federal level all the time, and he can't get anybody to listen to him.
Well,
right.
We have the advantage of the state government that they don't have in the federal government is we can't print money. So we have to have a balanced budget. And I said this morning at a radio station, and I got my numbers wrong, but we spend 60% of our budget on education, 20% on Medicare, and Medicaid, and 10% on incarceration. That's 90% of our budget right there. So there's only 10% that's truly kind of discretionary. And there's waste in every government, but I don't think it's as widespread as people think in Kentucky. There's always opportunities for improvement, but I think it's pretty solid budget in itself.
But when you take it one piece at a time and you look at it and you say, okay, we didn't get the benefit out of this that we thought, like you said on the improved reading score. Contract.
Well, let's talk about Medicaid itself.
Yeah.
When I came to the Senate in 2017, at that time, the Medicaid budget was $10 billion, and we had right at 900,000 of our population on Medicaid. And again, I've been in healthcare for 40 years, and I said, that budget's as big as it ever should be. Not because I wanted to kick anybody off Medicaid, but through gainful employment, so people can leave the Medicaid program and improving the health of our population. We shouldn't have to spend any more money on that. But the budget this year, now we've got 1.7 million of our population on Medicaid, and the budget is right at $16 billion. And again, that's lack of accountability. That program is managed by 6 managed care organizations, insurance companies, and they're really not incentivized to improve the health of the population.
No.
So that's what I focus on more and more as chairman of the Health Services Committee.
I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but you and I have had this conversation here about some of the things that happen between insurance companies and providers and the back and forth, and how hard it makes it for us to even understand what we're really buying. We talked about medication for losing weight and things like that. I was starting that medication at that time, and it was doing really well, but I can't get that medication now because it's been overrun for it. That's a whole different problem, but still the cost of it and understanding the fact that my insurance doesn't cover it, but if it's making me healthier, why wouldn't they want that so that my premium is not going out the door? Here, in a couple of years, I could be, down to a healthy weight and not having to take the medicine and being able to do the things that, that I should be able to do to maintain. Why wouldn't they want that?
Well, it's not about the money. It's about the money.
It's not about the money. It's about the money.
Such as United Healthcare, one of the largest insurers in the company. Last year, I think their profit was around $85 billion. One of the pharmaceutical companies, their profit was $26 billion. And the biggest challenge to healthcare in the United States is what I call the corporatization of healthcare.
Yeah.
It's no longer run by the not-for-profits. It's there for a profit motive. And I'm a capitalist to the nth degree, but I don't think anybody should make a fortune off the misfortune of others, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're spending 2 to 3 times more than other industrialized nations on healthcare, and our healthcare outcomes are not anywhere as good as theirs are. We're spending $13,000 per capita in the United States. Next closest country is Germany at $7,500. China spends $650. Now, the problem is right now our healthcare is about 18% of our gross national product. If it ever exceeds 20%, I'm confident that it's going to make our economy collapse. And already we cannot be competitive on an international scale spending that much on healthcare. We don't need to spend that much on healthcare.
I think the biggest problem is how do we put that genie back in the bottle? We've already released this. We've already opened Pandora's box, if you will, right? And now how do you put it back in and rein these companies in? Because I think that's an important step. And I'm starting to get a little bit more passionate in this conversation because this is something that's near and dear to me. I mean, I'm in my 50s now, so I'm looking at, okay, well, it's not just the aches and pains anymore. It's like, okay, it's harder to lose weight. It's harder to get yourself healthy and keep yourself healthy. And of course, if I was a young man, if I could talk to myself, 20 years ago and say, hey, you got to figure out how to keep this, under control, I would do that. But I'm beyond that, and I'm passionate. I want this to happen, but it's like the things that work for me and help me, I can't get a hold of it, and that bothers me.
It should bother everyone because we don't really reward healthy behaviors and healthy outcomes.
Yeah.
And it's the traditional model is you're paid more by doing more tests and longer length of stays. And the government's tried to put some corrective measures on that, but we're not getting the source of the problem. The biggest problem is in Kentucky is a lack of primary care that's available.
Yeah.
40% of our population lives in rural Kentucky. Only 17% of our primary care physicians are there. And I've asked this since the first day of my sentence. I've asked the insurance companies and the MCOs, even the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, why would anybody choose to practice in rural Kentucky when you're going to make 25 to 30% less than your urban counterparts? Because that's the payment disparity that exists.
Yeah, I mean, So why isn't there some incentive for moving to rural Kentucky or something like that? But which helps you. I mean, you have to have. You have to show a need, right? Well, I can't remember the exact word. If you want to put a hospital, right? You have to have a certificate of need, or whatever. Is that what it's called?
Yes, certificate of need, yes.
So you have to have a certificate of need that says, "Hey, is that HUD that does that? Who actually puts that together?"
It's CMS, Cabinet for Medicaid and Medicaid.
Pete Buttigieg.
Healthcare Finance Administration is the primary driver.
Gotcha.
Of it. Yep.
So you have to have this, but you don't have to have a certificate of need to open a doctor's office.
No, you don't. But doctors.
I mean, maybe that's a thought that. I mean, I get it. I hate to say a doctor. You only have to have so many doctors in one location, but that might be a way to kind of help.
But that's not the struggle for rural Kentucky, because again, as a former hospital CEO, I recruited a lot of doctors, and there's a lot of incentives out there to bring doctors to rural communities, like loan repayment, schools, scholarships. There's even federal programs that allow foreign medical graduates to come. And usually those are like 2 to 4 year programs. And once they complete that obligation, they leave. Because, again, they know that they're going to have to make 25 to 30% less.
But still, that's even better, though. It's even better to at least you have those for, that 4 to 5 years. And it does help them because it does incentivize people to go into healthcare. And to help get their, I mean, I don't agree with, nowadays, but it seems like every time we turn around, there's a certain person trying to, forgive all the loans and stuff for everybody. But,
but you don't need that. And again, the model I had as a former hospital CEO, when I became CEO, I had 7 doctors on my medical staff, and needed more physicians. And recruiting is always a difficult thing to do. So I talked to my medical staff about we need more doctors. And medical staff, they go, no, we think we've got it covered. But then as soon as the meetings are with, they come up to me and say, oh, we need another general surgeon. We only had one.
Yeah.
And I fought that battle forever. And finally, I asked my one general surgeon, I said, why can't I bring another one in? He said, oh, I'll starve to death. There's not enough business for both of us. The business is here. If I can guarantee you that you're not going to be hurt from this financially, would you be willing to bring somebody else in? He said, why wouldn't I? I don't want to be on call 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. So I said, then go to work for the hospital. I'll pay you what your average salary's been for the last 5 years. I'll give you that economic security. When I left, we had 4 general surgeons.
Yeah.
And our medical staff grew from 7 doctors to 34 because I
they
could guarantee them.
They stopped competing against each other and started working as a collective at that point, right?
Well, they knew they got a fair salary, because what I promised doctors coming to my hospital is you'll make at least the median for your specialty.
Yeah.
And that's fair. If you're a hard worker, you get an incentive to do that. But people want the quality of life that we have in rural Kentucky. But you can't ask them to pay a premium for being there. But
That's right.
But getting that stability is important. I mean, that's an incentive all of its own. If I know that the job is going to be there, the work is going to be there, and I don't have to go hustle for that. I don't want to make it sound like you're hustling for chasing ambulances or anything like that. But you don't have to go. The hospital is going to help get that. They're basically become your agent, if you will, right? To say, hey, come here. We've got a great set of surgeons, and they're doing your ads and advertising, and they're promoting your services there as a collective.
Speaking of somebody who just did that, Baptist Health just opened up with the Bound Credit Union back in Radcliffe, and opened up another regional facility, which used to be there, but it kind of died because of COVID. And thanks to Brett Guthrie, brought in additional monies. But that location right there helps. Because Fort Knox community is suffering because their clinic can't keep up with just the Fort Knox families. Not only that, but the veteran community that was dependent upon Ireland Army Hospital now has options outside of the VA for local care that they don't have to go all the way up to Louisville for. Yeah. So
I'm wondering, it seems like there should have been a certificate of need for a facility in the Radcliffe area or what have you.
I would assume
there should have been a need. There's some need because once Ireland Army Hospital closed, and that moved basically your hospital services off base.
100%.
Then that should have been it should have seen an increase there for a need. I don't know if this is the facility that's supplying that need. Do they have to have a certificate of need to open another branch like that, or do we know?
Ireland, was a federal hospital.
It was.
So that made a big difference. And there's a lot of different rules as to how you qualify for certificate of need. And
well, it was retirees could go there. It was a major hub support for the veteran community here.
But it was aged. I mean, it needed to be replaced.
Yeah, I get it.
And I understand why they closed it down because they weren't intending to house tons of permanent soldiers, but there's still a lot of soldiers that are in Fort Knox, and there are a lot of permanent people, a lot of retired people like yourself.
Well, again, I think they did a great job. Standing up the new clinic. It's a huge facility. It's at that newer on Wilson and Knox Boulevard, right by the Navy Federal Credit Union. Yep. Not to give you a shameless plug, but it was that newer facility right there. And of course, they've knocked down that whole plaza that was across the street on Knox Boulevard.
The old Murphy Mart.
Yep, that's ready to be built up. But having facilities like that, built for communities that need it across the state, not just in one area, but even in our other areas. But like you said, and don't, if I screw this up, but how you were saying that, we need to make it a place where people want to live, but we don't also need to make it so expensive that they can't live there.
Right,
and that it's got facilities and stuff like that it doesn't increase the cost to live there just because you get these additional facilities.
Well, another struggle I have is that, as I said earlier, the world I grew up in and worked in my whole life, you see a problem, you fix a problem.
Right.
One of the biggest problems we have with healthcare right now for the Medicaid population are dental services for adults and children because they haven't seen a pay increase in their rates for over 20 years.
That's like the paper hadn't having a rate increase in 8 years and cost of print went up.
Very similar.
And Biden economics are not helping our economy, regardless.
Well, and healthcare is just a microcosm of what's happening in rural Kentucky. But again, dentists, you're not going to pay them. So we don't have the money. Well, how much are you spending on people going to the ER for dental problems? And that's going to be a huge deal. And the price tag for that's about $9 million that they go to the ER that they don't need to go to the ER. So why aren't we using those funds to increase dental fees?
Yeah.
And we go, well, because what? Well, because.
But it moves the money.
Yeah.
That's why. And it's not about the money, it's about moving the money.
Right.
And we want to keep the money flowing into the same. And I have to believe that there's people that are out there thinking about, how do I get new revenue into my doors under these same guides, the same way. I'm thinking about like the different insurance companies and things. How do we keep flowing it into a very specific funnel that helps give them their kickbacks and their monies and things. I was never one. I think I started to say this earlier. I've never been really a conspiracy theorist on things, but man, it sure seems like it's time for us to take a deep look at how the medical industry is. There's absolutely it needs to go under the microscope, if you will.
Well, it does. Again, we're spending 30 cents of every dollar on healthcare just on the administration of healthcare. That's double other industrialized nations as well. So if you can reduce that in half, you've really made a big dent in it already. But again, that's controlled by the insurance companies, and that's difficult to do. But but again, healthcare is just a microcosm of what happens in the state. One of the biggest challenges that we have fiscally is urban versus rural. And, the folks in the urban areas are constantly saying, we don't get our fair share of tax dollars back. And my response is, really? You get our healthcare dollar, you get our recreation dollar, you get our entertainment dollars, you get a good chunk of our workforce. We could trade that in a heartbeat if we had the jobs in rural Kentucky to do that. And it just doesn't click with them. And what we really have to do in this state to be successful is develop symbiotic relationships with all of our communities. It's got to be win-win.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't meet that criteria, we don't need to pursue it. We had a situation, I think it's 4 years ago, where University of Louisville asked for $35 million to buy a Jewish hospital. Well, at the very same time, Our Lady of Bellefonte Hospital over in eastern Kentucky, who had served a little community called Russell, had 1,000 employees. They were closing. So as we're passing this bill, I'm asking the question, how can we give this money to uplift the Louisville Hospital when they got like 15 within a 20-mile radius?
Yeah.
We're doing nothing.
For the hospital across,
Yeah. So where's the symbiotic relationship there? And I guarantee if you invest in rural Kentucky, it lifts the tide for everyone.
It does. I mean, I get it. Meade County is probably not nearly as rural as Russell, Kentucky, or some of those other communities, but it's rural. It's more rural than Louisville is by far, more rural than even Elizabethtown. And it's, I know that it is. How do we? I mean, in this day and age, it used to be we communicated. I still find it difficult to understand why so many businesses choose to look. There's a lot of businesses, I get it, they need to be near interstates and things like that to move stuff, but there's no reason that a lot of these, even the insurance companies and stuff, can't move to a rural area of Kentucky where they have a need for, they have a workforce that's there. In most cases, they're hardworking people that just don't have opportunities there, and they want to stay close to home. So why not put a satellite office in one of those areas where you can and you set them up to work from home, and maybe you give them a place to come in. Why doesn't that seem like it would work? Because your facility costs in those areas are much cheaper than they are if you're sitting in a big building in Louisville. You're going to pay, you're going to get much more building down here in Meade County. Maybe not so much in Meade County as it used to be, because now the prices here have gone way up because we've got so many people that moved into the area and such. But you get down to Russell, Kentucky, or some of those other places, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't that work?
Well, we haven't made a concerted effort to do that, and a resolution I passed 2 sessions ago said we would develop a Medicaid payment model based on the National Deprivation Index, which is an index by zip code, which based on 6 social economic factors. Obviously, the higher the number, the more depressed your community is. And I said we need to base our payment policy on that to put the needed resources in these most desperate communities. I think it should be the same way with economic development. If you've got a community that's got a high poverty level, You invest in it, you get a double whammy. Now you get new tax revenue from these new jobs, but you also reduce entitlement payments.
Yeah.
And I use Walmart as the model. You know, Walmart didn't get rich by building their stores in the urban areas.
No.
They went to rural America, and look how they prospered there.
That's
You
a
see
great
the same-
story, by the way.
Well, you see the same thing with Dollar General right now, where they're popping up everywhere. There's money to be made in rural Kentucky that can lift up everyone if we do it in a very committed, concerted fashion, really committing to a symbiotic relationship. And I said from day one that if we leave a single county behind in Kentucky, we haven't done our job.
I mean, the Walmart story is a very cool story, and specifically because of how it started. You know, in rural Kentucky and rural Arkansas, and then, and they were Ben Franklin's to begin with. I don't know if do you remember Ben Franklin's?
Sure do.
So,
Five and 10.
which was like the Dollar General of they were a 5 and dime, right? It was Ben Franklin's 5 and dimes, which is interesting because those were the dollar stores of that day, right? And he just decided that he saw a problem with their distribution and said, I can do better than that. And he tried to get them to take on his distribution plan, and they wouldn't do it. So he said, I'll show you how to do it. And so all of his stores came under the Walmart name, and the rest is history.
Rural Kentucky is a hidden gem.
It is. There's
when it comes
lots
to
of
economic
hardworking
development.
people out here, and I think that we just got to find a way to incentivize these companies to move out of the cities. I think city growth is a problem. I don't think that we need to incentivize cities to grow anymore. And I think that maybe it's time for us to look at because right now, the state government is the one, and this is probably, I don't want to put you on a spot or anything like that, but the more I look at it, the more I think, well, the state government is what gives the city a power to do what they do, because the state government can, that's the charter, right, for the city. So, if the state government doesn't like what Louisville's doing, for instance, I'm not saying that they do or don't, they have an opportunity to take that charter back if they wanted to, right? The state government could then take that back and say, and so I started thinking about this the other day, and I'm not asking anybody here to answer this or come up with a reason, but my question is what does having a large city really do for your state overall?
Right now, it generates 60% of our revenue base, so they make that contribution. But they don't understand it could be much, much better for everyone if we would invest in the deprived communities.
And definitely that would.
When I was a hospital CEO, average tenure of a hospital CEO is about 6 years. So I'd go through a lot of CEOs in this region. And every time a new one would come to either Louisville or Owensboro or Bowling Green, they'd want to have lunch with me. And they'd say, we want to build a partnership. I want to be your new BFF. I said, that's great. If you'll help us keep our primary care and secondary care, you can have all the rest. That's a symbiotic relationship. And their eyes would kind of glaze over, and they'd say, well, one of them actually said, well, we need the primary care too. What if you do, then we don't have a symbiotic relationship. I think the biggest problem for us is we have not articulated a vision for Kentucky.
Yeah.
And if you don't have vision, you know
that's a vision and accountability.
But
two big words that you've said here tonight.
Well, can you articulate a vision? What our vision is for Kentucky? I don't think anyone can.
No,
it should be.
I think that I thought maybe I had an idea because we talk about but it's the more we sit here and think about it and talk about it, it's what I think as a vision for Kentucky is really just the actions that I see being taken. And I'm putting my own spin on what I think that vision really is. But in reality, there's no vision. There's no common goal for the entire state. It's like how does this region? It's like everybody's fighting for a piece of a pie, and it's
right.
and I think that it's I don't mind paying taxes. I mean, I don't know anybody that really minds paying taxes as long as we're getting the services and things that we need taken care of.
And it's a fair tax.
And it's a fair tax that not one group is paying more than the other. And don't get me wrong. I mean, if you go by consumption, then rich people who make more money tend to buy more stuff.
Only problem I have
and more expensive stuff.
The only problem I have is that I don't mind paying taxes either. but I do mind paying taxes when part of the working force is able-bodied and able to work, and my taxes are paying for them to sit on their butt.
Right.
So I think that that's the other problem in our state is figuring out how do we get the able-bodied people to stop milking the system and get up off their butts and go to work.
I mean, that's a
Be
big
a
question. That's a big
be a
question.
productive
I think
member
that's
of
the
society.
question. I think that is the question that
Now,
everybody's trying to solve.
Let me define this though. I want to be clear because there are single parent moms that get stuck in a really bad situation and they've got multiple children and they are all alone. They are by themselves trying to keep their kids and do everything that they can, and it can be very difficult for them to daycare, but by the time you add up all the things that they got to pay for to take care of a kid, it can be a very big struggle. But that husband of that person or that father of that person who left them in that situation better not be collecting a check and sitting at home doing the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
I'm also do.
I mean, but let me say this though. One thing that I think that was actually part of the process and the thought process from the 1960s, though, that when they started putting welfare together and the welfare packages together, and they said, "Oh, we're going to give this money to women and children." But if you have a man in your house, you can't have it.
No,
and
but-
that I mean, no,
You're right. You're right.
I'm just saying, and that is what drove single parent households more than anything. That incentivized. Because I'll tell you right
disagree.
now, my mom and dad went through some very rough times when they were first married. They got married in 1970,
Sure.
and they were and this is actually, we lived through this. And there was a time where, dad was between jobs and he was trying to, or actually he had a job and he made enough money. And so mom went to try to get like food stamps or something to help us through a time. And they told her that she needed to kick dad out of the house.
Now, see,
They actually
I agree
told
with
her
you.
that.
That's wrong. Yeah, I get it. But the point is though, your dad was effectively looking for work. He was proactive.
He was actually working, but he just wasn't making enough.
I'm talking about the TikTok kid that's going on and doing a live stream video and bragging about how he gets a check and he doesn't have to do anything for it. But they're more than capable of going out and working, or the girl. And
No, I
will say
agree.
that there's a lot of programs that have come a long way too. For example, on ECTC, they have a program, and I hope it goes through. But they're going to build a complex there that lets you bring your family. You're a single mom. You can go to college and get a degree. You can be productive, get into a job skill, and they help you with your kids and everything else. So you can go to school, finish your degree. That's brilliant. I think that type of program is exactly what we need to get to.
I think that's how our taxes should be used to get us out of this. I agree.
But that's I think a shift we're seeing in human resource development now.
Sure.
It used to be that employers would look at the work person and that's it, and we realized that no, you got to look at the whole person.
Right.
And some of these programs, like you're talking about, ECTC, is a good step forward.
Right.
But I think to address the entitlement programs, it's multi-generational now. Is we got to have a head start. What I would like to see is go into our school systems and kids are, say, 6th grade and say, the entitlement program that you have now is not going to be around when you graduate from high school. So you need to be prepared. Let's go back to self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
But know that we are a compassionate nation.
Yep.
That if someone has a situation beyond their control,
100%.
then we're going to be there for you. We'll lift you up. We'll give you 4 years to get your education, give you 4 years of housing, food stamps. It's a one-time deal.
Yeah.
But you got to make an
After
effort.
that, exactly.
Yeah,
You gotta
no,
make an
and
effort.
I agree with that, and it happens. I mean, I know. I mean, it was a big dent for us taking on 3 kids. My income's decent, but when you add 3 kids all at once to the mix, it changes your budgetary requirements.
Oh yeah.
It does.
And then when they turn teenagers, I'm going to be screwed on groceries if they keep rising like they are.
Kathy and I had 3.
Oh, I know.
We had 3, but they're 4 years apart, so we got to kind of like by the
Recycle
time they're like 12, by the time Justin's 12 years old, we
Yeah.
had 3 from 4, 8, and 12. So
Right.
it's like, we were able to spread that out, and it was. So I couldn't imagine you all of a sudden went from 0 to 3. But you had your niece that also at one time, right? So
Nieces. Yeah.
you went from 1 to 3.
2 to 3. 2 to 3. Yeah, it's
we've
good.
got some significant challenges, particularly on the federal level. I hate to make it sound like into doomsday for Kentucky, but truly, I think we're in the best position that maybe we've been in the history of this state.
Oh, I was going to ask you to go there. Our reserve, Mark, you called it what did you call it? The slush fund?
The rainy day.
The rainy day fund.
Rainy day.
So I know we had talked, you showed up, I covered this in the news, that we were about 40-something days before we came into the session. That
We were, 2017, we had 4 days of revenue
Right.
on hand to deal with issues. And this last, before the budget, we had $3.7 billion set aside for rainy day fund. We took 2.7 of that to invest in infrastructure.
House
in
Bill
Kentucky.
1.
Yes, and that's the way you need to do it. You save your money, then you spend it
Right.
to build on infrastructures and things like
But
that.
now we have over a 60-day rainy fund at the close of the session. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if
Still strong.
fit hit the shan,
Yep.
right, we could survive for 60 days.
And you look what happened in the past. You know what we saw last year with the floods in eastern Kentucky and the tornadoes in western Kentucky. If you don't have that reserve fund, then you've got to start cutting from services and programs
That's right.
the state has.
Shut 'em down.
That's not the way to do
That's
that.
a literal rainy day when you have a flood.
Again, I said this is the most fiscally
a lot of
responsible
rain.
budget that I think you're going to find in the United States. And
300 lines of data that you guys went through. You and Nancy Tate, House Representative 27th District. Nancy Tate, y'all had covered that y'all went through 300 lines of budgetary data to get to the budget that we're at now
Yeah, it'll
and
make
create
your eyes
these
cross.
savings.
yes,
So
we did.
And where's that printed at?
it's it's in your favorite Meade County newspaper called what is that paper called? It's kind of famous.
Oh,
You don't know?
no, I know what it's called. I just want to know if you're going to say it.
I'm waiting on you.
Shameless
I'll ask you, Stephen. What's your favorite Meade County newspaper?
Meade Messenger.
The Messenger.
The
Yeah,
Messenger.
that's right.
The Messenger KY.
The Messenger KY. Go to themessengerky.com for all your latest news and advisories to those things that are happening in your community. All right, famous shameless plug. Steve, you got a
That's what I was
campaign
looking
going
for.
on. You got a campaign going on. You're in a primary. You've got an
do.
opponent, and now you have a debate coming up. Thank you. You want to talk about the race and some of your what you're running on going into the primary and into the general election?
Sure, you know, when you completed a second term like I've had 8 years, you get to look kind of in the rearview mirror. And you know, I'd ask you folks is what would you want from an elected official? I know what I would want: someone who's reduced taxes, who's invested in our education system, who's funded our pension, has reduced bureaucracy in Kentucky, has created jobs in Kentucky. You know, you do that checklist. I've been a part of all that. Does that mean we've solved all the problems for Kentucky? No, not by any
course
means.
not.
But now we've got resources available where we can solve those problems.
Yeah.
So we've set the stage for a great future in Kentucky, and I want to be part of that. But I'm very proud of the job that I, along with our Republican House and Senate, have done over the last 8 years. We have moved this state forward. It's probably the most positive transitional period in the history of this state.
Right.
And even though our governor likes to take a lot of credit for what's happening right now, no, it was Republican-led.
Only during election year. So
Again, you look at over an 8-year
he's
time
disappeared
frame.
now. I mean, for the most part.
Oh, he's still taking credit, but
Well, yeah, he does have his little. He does have his.
Yeah.
I do get his daily. From the governor's desk email. I think it.
So I've been getting a lot of your legislative updates, and they're going in the paper as frequently as we get them to make sure that we keep the community. And I will tell you, the feedback from the community is they like getting those updates. And I don't know why they weren't there for a while. I don't know why they ever stopped, but it's one of the first things that I put into the paper. Obviously, very short session, 60 days is a short session to me. 30 days is going to be even shorter next year for you guys. But going into this primary, it's a weird season as I'm learning Kentucky and Commonwealth. It seems like everybody wants to come out because it's a presidential election, but the primary won't get as much attention because it's like the candidates have already been decided on for the presidential, right? And everybody wants to participate in a presidential, but they forget the local politics. And Mark and I have advocated, I don't know how many times and how many shows about the importance of even voting at every voting day in our county and for local politics is equally as important because the people we elect are the ones that spend the money that trickles down from the federal government.
that they do. And if you don't think that's for real, then just spend a budget session with us and see.
Yeah, and I mean, if 10% of the population show out to vote on the local elected officials, and that they're complaining because they don't have this or they don't have that, and the majority of the people are greater than the 10%. It's like,
I mean,
how do you?
I mean, when you do, I mean, they do local. I mean, local elections and local elections are big, the biggest primary that we usually have.
Yeah, I get it.
If we have primaries, that is, if we have people that are primaried. But the presidential election is the one that everybody comes out and votes for. The second biggest one is the general election for local elections.
Yeah.
And in those off years for statewide and stuff, it's not as big. You know, and then of course on the third year or the fourth year is there are no elections. So, but I don't know. I don't know what else we can do. We've talked about it. We advertise about it. We try to get people to come out and vote.
Well, I'm going to be doing a big push in the paper over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we got 2 weeks before May hits, and we're going to make sure that that gets pushed. Vote. But I'm excited to say, though, that there will be a primary election debate between you and your opponent, and I'm glad that you're allowing the messenger to broadcast that. And Mark, you're going to be the moderator.
I'm going to do my best to moderate that. So I mean, that's.
I have the request in right now. If you're tuned in, we're trying to get the Meade County High School, so I'm waiting on the approval for that. And then once we have,
I'm sure we can find
but right now the tentative date
town.
is the 15th at 7 p.m. Sorry, we do a 7 p.m. That way people have a chance to eat. They can tune in. Or it's right about pillow time, so it's fresh and they can get to it. But we're gonna try to set this all up.
What's is it 1 hour? Is that what we're doing? Or?
It'll be a 1 hour debate. And I'll probably have some stuff in there like, you're done. But I think the one that we need, where is it at? It's in here somewhere. Hold on. I'm going to find it here. Hold
it's
on.
hard to take him serious when he goes through that.
That's the one. Yeah, you're done. Turn off the mic. I don't know. But we'll have all that set up. It won't be a fancy farm situation, but it'll be a genuine cross-question debate, I think. And I'm really excited that both you and your opponent agreed. He called in to agree after I'd already talked to you. And I was like, okay, well, great. Sounds like we'll move this forward.
Yeah, I mean, we were on the show when he called in.
So I think that'll be...
it was instant.
But I think that's good politics, too, because I agree with you. You have a long-standing record of the things that you've done, and to enable the process and allow the competition to have that type of exposure with you openly on the stage, I commend you.
Well, I'm a big proponent of communication. It's a wonderful tool. We should use it more often.
Yeah.
I think the time we invest into it pays dividend in communication to try to explain what happened or why it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So going up to the primary, do you got any big events or fundraisers coming up that you'd like to draw attention to?
Well, every day, but my next big event is next May 7th, Tuesday at the Ohio County Park. They're hosting a meet and greet for me there, so I'm looking forward to that event.
Exciting.
But
okay.
Tomorrow, for example, it's National Day of Prayer.
Yes.
I'll be in Breckenridge County at noon participating in that, and then I'll be participating in the one in Ohio County at 6 o'clock that evening. But that's a great event. I always look forward to participating.
Yeah. So the one in Breckenridge County is at 11 o'clock?
Noon.
Is it noon?
Yeah. It's about the same time at Brandenburg at the courthouse.
Ours is at noon here, too. But, I mean, so it's noon here, noon... It's an hour difference as well.
Yep, and then we will actually have the Pastor Ryan podcast tomorrow, Christians in Business. It's kind of a neat podcast, and he did leadership the last time we did one. So I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow is going to be an exciting day. Mark, you got some news for the news that's the news across the nation related to the party and what's coming up? I know we got a meeting right before the election. So
it's a very busy, 5 days before the election because we have 4 days.
Very busy.
So, because on the Saturday before the election, we will have the statewide, the state convention, Republican Party convention. That will be down in Somerset. Anybody that would like to go can go. It's a $25 fee. They ask you. It helps pay for the for the event and stuff like that.
The donuts.
Of course,
I'm
you can
just
go in, anybody can go and observe and sit in the gallery. Only those who vote will sit up front. That's really the only difference.
Delegates.
The delegates and such. So we will have, so we'll be going to that. That will be on the 18th of May. Then on the 20th of May, we will have our regular Republican Party, Meade County Republican Party meeting here. It'll be at the 2714 Brandenburg Road in Brandenburg, Kentucky. That is, again, it starts at 7 o'clock, and we will have that as our regular time. And we invite everyone out, all the Republicans to come out and visit with us. And it's, I mean, it's the facility is not huge, but, you know, we'll make room. And if we have too many people, we'll move it outside. It's not a big deal. If it rains, we'll find another way to get everybody.
Just wait a minute; it'll change. That's Kentucky weather
right.
for you.
And then of course we go on the 21st. We vote. So and we can't point out enough that we need everyone to go out and vote. And we need you to make your voice heard. I mean, you know, we have a primary. We have people
running for office.
And I'll tell you this. Even though it right now everything looks like, hey, Donald Trump is our candidate, no one else is in the race.
Still
He's
gotta go
moving
vote.
forward. Go vote and support him.
Not only do you send a
vote.
message that you're standing behind who's running for president, but it also gives your party, regardless of what party you are, an idea of what they can expect during the general election based off of turnout. So if we increase turnout during a primary, they're going to shake and tremble during the general election. Just
we passed 220 bills this session, which is kind of a record number, but one that probably didn't get a lot of attention that should is for the first time we're going to be teaching civics as part of the public school curriculum. It needs to be.
Good.
That will help.
I would love to participate. I
hit
think
the button.
I'm hitting it. I would love.
No, hit the button for the
the applause button. Hold on.
applause button. Yeah, the
Yes.
get excited button.
One of the things I'd like to see as part of that is on Veterans Day is have all the, particularly high school kids, because it's kind of a violent film, but Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
If you watch that movie and you don't feel a surge of patriotism and an obligation to be engaged in this
I know.
process, you don't need to live here.
Yeah, no.
I mean, and it's, you know, that's the way it was. I mean, they cared enough about a family and keeping a family
I know
structure in that time that they said, hey, he's the last one.
Yeah.
And they were willing to sacrifice other lives to save a family.
But we
Right.
forget that generation, which we now call the greatest generation,
The greatest generation.
came out of the Depression.
Yes.
You know, one of the toughest times in the history of this country, but they didn't shy away from their responsibility. They stepped up in the country that we
right.
know in the privilege.
I remember watching the videos and hearing the stories, but kids would pick up cans and donate them to the recycling center so they could make knives and guns and
That's
all
right.
that stuff. And it wasn't wasteful country. It was work together country. And it was Rosie the Riveter and all those other things that made our country come together, much like we see in Kentucky when we have a natural disaster. And I know we just got past the 50th tornado anniversary, but you know, our country is founded on the backs of people like you're talking about. And you know, today we get a senator who's been running and representing for the last 8 years. I'm honored to have you in the Messenger Studios. Give you the final thoughts to you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As I said earlier, communication is a wonderful tool, which we use it more often. I'd be willing to do this every day if the opportunity presented itself, but appreciate the dialogue tonight and look forward to the future for this community and for Kentucky.
Thanks for coming out.
Thanks everybody for
Appreciate
coming
it.
to the show tonight. We appreciate your tuning in. As you know, we know you'll probably tune in later to check us out too, and that's okay. Leave us your feedback in the comments below, and we like to follow up. So whether you're watching us on the Messenger or the Meade Truth, this episode was brought to you in part by the Meade County Republican Party and broadcast in the Meade County Messenger Studios, or the Messenger Studios. I keep screwing that up. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.